Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms. My name's Stuart. Time for another old world discussion video. Let's talk about maps, lore and roleplay games.
Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Counter-Attack Bases. They stock a wide range of counters, gaming aids and movement trays for multiple game systems, and offer custom items to suit your club, your event, or even your podcast or YouTube channel. Check out the link in the video description.
Now, there's been quite a lot of chatter in the last week or so about the Warhammer, the Old World official interactive map. There's a couple of really interesting videos on it on YouTube already. The Square Base guys, Rob and Val, have done a really nice chat around some of the reveals on that map and what they might mean for the game, and something very similar for Nathan at the Great Book of Grudges as well, and his Warhammer Total War knowledge really helped there, and he talked about some of the things we may see from Cathay. I don't want to do that too much with this video. I think that's ground well covered, but it did pique my interest in a different way. I've been thinking a lot recently about the lore of Warhammer, the Old World, and how that sits and whether it's right at the moment, whether we need some more. And I've got some ideas on it, and I thought those maps were the perfect tool for as a jumping off point, really, to have a little look at what's going on beyond the tabletop game. Now, having just told you I don't want to delve too deeply into all the news around that map, I am using it as a jumping off point because it has some links and some connections to some of my theories and some of my ideas of what will hopefully develop the lore of Warhammer, the Old World. So let's start very briefly with the Old World map. The interactive Old World map resides at theoldworld.com. At least it did. At the point of recording this, the map has been switched off, and it's been up and down a few times in the last couple of weeks. I very luckily had it open on my computer, and I haven't refreshed the page, so I can still scroll around on the page. What I can't do anymore is click on any of the flags, and some of them didn't work anyway. But that's fine for what I want to say about the map. It is huge. You have got a great expanse right from the Chaos Waste at the top, which has been expanded and filled out with more places and more icons and badges. It goes all the way down south to the lands of the Khemri, and that looks pretty much the same to me. We've got an awful lot over in the central part of the Old World, of course, with Bretonnia, the Empire, all of the Dwarven realms, the Orc and Goblin areas, and then the new additions of Talia and Estalia, which has really got people talking this week. We also have lands over to the east as well, which don't really appear on this map, but we've seen elements from in early Old World almanacs, as they are called now. They were just originally development diaries for the game way back when it was first announced, and we saw glimpses of maps and places to do with Cathay, which we now consider is on the way. There's even been subtle changes to the map in the east, where we have this Cathayan ship appearing in place of what was a sea monster before. And these changes, along with the Talia and Estalia and a few other things like Norse dwarves, etc., have really got people excited. I don't intend to spend too much time talking or theorising about the individual places on the map. We don't really know why they are there at this stage, just that it's exciting and it opens up lots of possibilities. I've talked on the channel before about the lore in the main Old World rulebook, about the amount of time that was devoted to Estalia and Talia, and talking about Dogs of War. So it is an interesting link to see those appearing on the Old World map now. The lore in the core rulebook also dedicated quite a few words to Norska and raiders and Norsemen that maybe weren't so chaos lent at the time. And maybe you can just build those armies with your current Warriors of Chaos themes anyway. The Wolves of the Sea, you can have your own headcanon about what god they are worshipping, and maybe they are just rough Norsemen. You could definitely build a theme around that, and maybe we don't always have to expect there to be a full army list or rules behind it. What's on this map could very much be just a broadening of ideas that opens avenues in the future and doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get full faction releases and new army books. It certainly isn't new of Games Workshop to come up with names and places and things which really give people the idea of a greater depth in a world. But the reality is it exists nothing more than that place name or that spot on the map, which is really cool as well. And that may be what we're seeing with Talia and Estalia. Maybe we will see some more Dogs of War units, or a way to play some of the mercenaries that are dotted throughout the other arcane journals as part of a combined force in the future. And that would be very cool. Would I expect right now to see a Talian army, a Estalian army with new rangers? It would be amazing. But it's also a huge endeavour as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if we just got some instructions that if you want to field those armies, use the Bretonnian and Empire miniatures, and maybe even many of their rules. There are lots of ways to explore that side of the hobby without needing Games Workshop to support us. So great if they do, but if it's just names on a map that inspires people to make things themselves from the existing ranges and rules, then that's pretty cool as well. We saw around launch, they focus in and look at the micro level battles in the small region of the Border Princes, rather than that sort of larger macro view of the old world that we've seen before. And many people thought that that was part of keeping the old world to those 9 factions. But of course, the more releases that we've had, the more books that we look at, and the more things that we are told, we realise that it is starting to expand a little bit, and the focus is potentially growing, but I still believe a lot of that just exists in our minds and the way we want to play the game. It's probably also worth noting that Crucible 7 with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition have expanded into the old world in areas that maybe weren't covered quite as much before, including Talia and Estalia, I believe. So maybe there's a little bit of a nod there, and I'll circle back round to that in a moment. I've been working on an idea for a video like this, talking about lore and the development of the old world lore for a couple of weeks now. And this oddly links back to the changes in the old world interactive map. First noticed on Facebook, but also on Reddit as well. We have this post: "The Shaper from the Shadows, how a fan-made map has become canon." And many of you who are in the Facebook groups will have likely seen this map. It came up around the time of all the different posts saying, have you seen these changes to the maps? They've disappeared again. Talia and Estalia have been added, etc. And this poster, who's posted on Reddit in the example I'm giving here, is talking all around how the maps have changed, how that an independent content creator made some maps, and that how they have been absorbed into the Warhammer lore and ethos and canon now, and Graham McNeil has cited certain things in certain books and so on and so on. And as you can imagine, there's a little bit of a tone of frustration with Games Workshop there, which is not completely unfounded, with the lack of crediting people in many instances, and the comments, as usual, are fairly predictable as well, about people mostly complaining about Games Workshop stealing ideas from independent creators. But if you delve a little bit deeper, it's not quite as simple as that. The original poster of that Reddit article, and the person, I believe, sharing them on the Facebook groups, cites an interview they have on the Warhammer wiki with MadAlfred, or Alfred Nunez Jr., to give him his real name. Now, I'm not going to read the whole article to you. I will try and remember to pop a link in the video description. Just go and have a quick read. There's not too much in there, but it gives you a little bit of an idea and insight into Alfred Nunez, who is a well-regarded man who's a games master, big fan of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, Fantasy Battle, and many other games, has produced lots of work linked to them. Most of it completely independent for his own use, that he shares via his website, completely non-affiliated with anything official, though interestingly he has done some work officially for Crucible 7, which is important, and we'll come back to that in a few moments. As part of the interview, he is made aware that some of his work has been used and become canon, and he was asked whether he was fully aware of that, and which he replies he wasn't. But to focus on that, I would say it's a little bit disingenuous, but it is covered quite clearly in the rest of the interview that he has worked officially for Crucible 7, and that also he is not at liberty to answer any questions about what he may or may not be working on with Crucible 7 at the time of the interview. He also quite clearly states that his maps are derivatives of GW's IP, and he doesn't believe there is any reason for these developers to seek his permission, and we're talking about video game developers as well who have used his things, and it's just a matter of using internet searches and finding resources that they believe to be official and nothing more than that. So if you have seen those posts on social media, as honourable as they may seem, and I'm sure they were in intention, I'm not so sure that Games Workshop is quite the big bad guy that is being made out to be there. Most of the time we're talking about IP partners as well, computer games developers, that kind of thing, using his work. And if his ideas have been used on the new interactive map, maybe there's more behind the scenes that we just don't know yet. He very clearly states on his website that he's worked for Crucible 7 at times, and he's contributed work to some of their products, including Archives of the Empire, Volume 1, Altdorf, The Crown of the Empire, Sea of Claws, and Lustria. And if you take a little look inside the cover of the first of those titles, which I happen to own myself, Archives of the Empire, he is clearly credited by Crucible 7 and Games Workshop. It's a licensed product. So I think it's a little bit unfair to say that his ideas have been completely stolen and he's not being credited, because he clearly has an official capacity there. So why spend time digging into Mr. Nunez's work and connections with official Games Workshop or their IP partners? And it's certainly not to bag on the poster, who was generally trying to protect him as well, having interviewed him. I'm sure, as I said a little bit earlier, that comes from a good place, and it comes from a place of making sure people are credited where credit's due. Well, it's because maybe there's more of a story behind the scenes than we know yet. We've seen the expansion of this map. We've seen those claims that he came up with those ideas and those areas, particularly of Attilia and Estalia, etc. And that's really exciting. And maybe he is involved with Crucible 7 still. It looks like he's definitely involved in Crucible 7. Does that mean he could be involved with the interactive map? And if so, why would he be? Well, Crucible 7 announced on the release day or the launch day of Old World, they were at the Warhammer World when I went to launch day, they announced that Warhammer the Old World RPG is in production. They are making that game, and it's all quiet at the moment as they work on it behind the scenes, but we know there's an Old World RPG coming from Crucible 7, the makers of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th Edition, and he's worked for them before. Just maybe, could that map be being used by both parties? Is that going to become the official map? Maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe it has nothing to do with it. Maybe he hasn't been credited for those things, but it doesn't sound like he's too worried, as he mentioned in that interview. But maybe there's a link there, and that is really interesting, and maybe another reason why we're seeing some of these areas appear on the map that may or may not turn into playable armies. And for me, that's the exciting part. And what this video was originally going to be about, or the ideas for this video, was going to be about what the future of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Old World Edition, whatever they call it, may bring for the Old World. What will it do to help the game expand in terms of lore, especially while we're still sitting on just the one novel from Black Library? We don't really know a great deal about what's coming with the Warhammer, the Old World version of the roleplay game. The last time I saw any real news about it, and I don't really look in all the right places if I'm honest, was on the Jordan Sorcery channel when he interviewed Dominic McDowell, who's the CEO of Crucible 7. And the headlines from that interview were that the standard Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay wfrp wasn't going anywhere and more expansions were planned. And a little note that the Old World RPG was not years away, but still in its early days. And that generally speaking, it was going to be slightly less complex and more streamlined to make it more accessible for new RPGers and for modern style RPGers, which seems pretty cool as well. But I'm excited about it. I'm excited about all the beautiful supplements that it may entail. I love the stuff that Crucible 7 do now. I've got loads and loads of the supplements that I bought through Humble Bundles or individually that I use for inspiration or just for reading through. I don't do a lot of role playing anymore, even though I may have done a little bit in my teenage years, but I'm definitely excited to give this a go. And Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay had such a big effect on expanding the Old World universe back in the early days of Games Workshop, and I'm hoping that Crucible 7 will help develop the lore and the ethos and the time of Warhammer the Old World even more through the release of this game. I really like the lore that the Old World team have put out now. The core rulebook is fantastic. There's lots of lore in there and sets the scene really well, and each arcane journal is just so cool. However, there isn't lots, and if we remove the lore that comes after that point, if we accept that all the pre-existing lore is there, the formation of the old world and all that stuff still exists, when we take away all the stories us old fantasy players know that happened post old world, all the stuff that we used to game in the world that was, there's not very much there. There's very thin, and they're not done anything wrong there. How much can they write? It takes a long time to develop that. So I think we all still exist with the old world being the old world as it was around the 2500s, and in most cases much of it is probably the same, but there are differences, and I'm really excited to see how that expands. And without many novels on the way, and I hope there are more, hopefully something like this RPG will just give us a little bit more depth and a little bit more flavor for the world, and I think that can only be a good thing for the game. And also let me know in the comments what you'd like to see from a roleplay game. If you intend to buy it, are you intending to play the old world roleplay game, or would you pick it up purely from a nice to have book reference material kind of thing? And of course, going back to where we started, the conversation around that map, I'd love to know your thoughts on that. Are these all factions we're going to see, or are they just more seeds, ideas for the future that maybe they could expand to, which is probably where I'm leaning to a little bit more right now. But wouldn't it be wonderful to see the game do so well that they can expand into those areas in the future? And if we assume, and I think we can safely assume, that Cathay is on the way now, then how do they present that army? Surely a 48-page arcane journal won't quite cut it. It needs to be bigger. And does that become the only army list with a full army book, or do they release a little bit of a campaign book that they're involved in, and maybe we get a Dogs of War army in there as well, which enables us to use some of those mercenary units and maybe some Empire and Bretonnian miniatures, and to use as Talir or as stallions, so they can almost release another faction without releasing another miniatures range, which again, I don't know, but that wouldn't surprise me if they went down that kind of route. We shall see. It's really, really exciting times. Definitely time to stop rambling now. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch the video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I really love to hear your thoughts below. If you'd like to support the channel, please do give us a like, drop a comment, subscribe to the channel, all that usual stuff. Check out the links in the video description below as well. Check out the channel sponsor, Counterattack Bases, and also the other affiliates I have as well. I have a Patreon, which is a brilliant way of supporting the channel and enabling me to afford to spend the time making videos like this, so check that out as well. But thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.